The sign on the door said Sterling and Associates, Premium Culinary Consultants. Clifton Webb read it once, adjusted the strap of his canvas bag, and pushed through anyway. He wasn't supposed to be there. That was the first thing the receptionist made clear. Not with words, with the way her eyes moved from his worn work boots, to his faded flannel shirt, to the bag that had a small paint stain near the zipper, that no amount of washing had ever fully removed. "Do you have an appointment?" "I do." 3 o'clock. Clifton Webb. She typed something slowly, the way people type when they've already decided the answer. Mr. Webb. A pause that lasted a beat too long. "You're here about the apprenticeship program referral for your grandson." "That's right. Marcus Sterling is finishing a meeting. You can wait over there." Over there was a bench near the door. Not the chairs by the window. Not the seating area with the good light and the coffee and the small dish of wrapped chocolates. The bench near the door, like a delivery driver waiting for a signature. Clifton sat down. He set his bag between his feet. He folded his hands in his lap and waited. He had learned a long time ago how to wait without letting anyone see what waiting cost him. Clifton Webb was 67 years old, 5 feet 10, but he'd lost maybe half an inch in recent years. The kind of thing that happens quietly, the way most losses do. His hands were large and calloused, permanently stained at the knuckle creases from 40 years of working in professional kitchens. He wore the same pair of glasses he'd had for 6 years. The left hinge repaired twice with a rubber band that he'd eventually replaced with a small piece of wire. If you passed him on the street, you'd think, retired. Maybe a school custodian. Maybe a mechanic. You wouldn't think 5-time regional culinary champion. You wouldn't think the man who trained under Pierre Marchand in Lyon in 1987. You wouldn't think the chef the Chicago Tribune called in a 1994 review the most instinctive American palate working today. You wouldn't think any of that, because Clifton Webb stopped looking like any of that a long time ago. He grew up in the Pullman neighborhood on the south side of Chicago, the son of a railroad worker and a woman who made the best sweet potato cornbread in a 6-block radius, which, in Pullman, was saying something. He discovered cooking at 11 years old, standing on a step stool beside his mother, learning that food wasn't just fuel. It was language. It was the thing you said when words ran out. By 30, he had his own restaurant. A small place on 43rd Street called 14 Tables, named because that was exactly how many tables fit in the dining room without making people feel crowded. The Tribune Review came 2 years after opening. The James Beard nomination came the year after that. Then came the fire. An electrical fault in the kitchen. A Tuesday night in February, after closing. No one was hurt. But 14 Tables was gone in 4 hours, and the insurance company found 3 reasons in the fine print not to pay. Clifton rebuilt. Slowly. A catering operation first, then a small cafe, then a teaching position at a culinary institute on the west side. He married late, at 44, a woman named Rosalind, who taught middle school English and laughed at his jokes even when they weren't that funny, which he always suspected was the real definition of love. Rosalind died of ovarian cancer 7 years ago. And something in Clifton went very quiet after that. Not gone, just quiet. He kept teaching. He kept cooking. At home. For his daughter Anita and her husband. For the neighbors who left Tupperware on his porch. For the kids in his building who knocked when they could smell something good through the door. He raised his grandson Deshaun the last 2 years after Anita's divorce left her working double shifts at the hospital. Deshaun was 17. Quiet kid, sharp eyes, built like a point guard. He'd started cooking beside his grandfather the way Clifton once stood beside his own mother. And he was good. Genuinely, startlingly good. With an instinct for flavor that you couldn't teach if it wasn't already there. When Deshaun told Clifton about the Sterling Associates apprenticeship, a paid 1-year program, prestigious, competitive, the kind that opened doors that otherwise stayed shut, Clifton drove him to the application session himself. Sat in the parking lot for 40 minutes after dropping him off. Didn't go inside. He knew what those rooms smelled like. 3 weeks later, Deshawn came home at 4:15 in the afternoon, 2 hours before he was supposed to. His jacket was still on. His shoes were still tied. He sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the surface for a long time. What happened? Clifton asked. Nothing. Deshawn. A long quiet. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed on the street outside. They said I didn't have the right foundation. Said the program was for students with classical training. Said the program was for students with classical training. Said hey. He stopped. Said what? Deshawn looked at his grandfather. Said some people's backgrounds just aren't the right fit. Clifton's hands went still on the dish towel he was holding. Not shaking. Still. The kind of stillness that comes just before something moves. He said in front of people. Whole room, Grandpa. Clifton set the towel on the counter. Walked to the hallway. Took his jacket from the hook. Where are you going? To get your explanation. Grandpa, don't. But the door was already closing, and across town and a glass and chrome office on Michigan Avenue. Marcus Sterling was about to make the worst professional decision of his life. Clifton Webb pushed through the door of Sterling and Associates at 3:02 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon. The office was everything he expected: frosted glass partitions, framed magazine covers, a reception desk made of something that was either expensive marble or expensive fake marble. He couldn't tell, and it didn't matter. The smell of whatever diffuser oil money buys to make a room feel curated rather than lived in. The receptionist looked up, then away, then back. In that sequence, that means someone is trying to decide how to make you feel like a problem without technically saying so. I'm here for Marcus Sterling. I spoke with his assistant this morning, Clifton Webb, about the apprenticeship program and my grandson Deshawn Webb. Mr. Sterling is available. His assistant confirmed 3 o'clock. A beat. The receptionist picked up a phone, murmured something. Set it down. He'll be right out. Marcus Sterling was 41 years old, the kind of man who had built a reputation on aesthetics. The right tie, the right handshake, the right vocabulary for describing a reduction sauce in a way that made people feel included in something exclusive. He had a television pilot in development. He had 800,000 Instagram followers. He had a philosophy about French technique and American innovation that he had, as far as Clifton could tell, mostly borrowed from people who'd actually cooked. He walked out from behind the frosted glass with his hand already extended, the way people do when they've decided the meeting will be brief. Mr. Webb. The handshake was firm. The smile was practiced. I understand you have some concerns about your grandson's application. I want to understand why he was dismissed from the room before the evaluation was complete. Sterling tilted his head. Just slightly. I wouldn't characterize it as dismissed. We had a conversation about program fit. In front of 12 other applicants. We have limited spots. I'm honest about that up front. You told a 17-year-old boy his background wasn't the right fit, in front of a room of his peers. Sterling's smile held, but something behind it shifted. He glanced at the receptionist, then back. Mr. Webb, I appreciate you coming in. I really do. But this program is highly competitive. We accept students with classical culinary training, cordon bleu, CIA graduates, students with formal certificates. Your grandson's application listed self-taught and, he made a small diplomatic gesture, home kitchen experience. That's wonderful, truly, but this isn't a home kitchen. His knife skills test scored in the top 4 of the group. A pause. The evaluation is holistic. He butchered a chicken in under 4 minutes with a dull knife, and the instructor asked him to slow down so she could watch the grip again. That's what his sheet said. I have a copy. Sterling's expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. He took a breath. I think what's happening here is a misunderstanding of what this program is designed to do. We're not I'd like to see the scoring rubric. That's not something we share externally. Then I'd like to know the specific criteria my grandson failed to meet in writing, so I can understand the decision. Sterling looked at him. Really looked, for the first time. The worn jacket, the glasses with the wire hinge, the canvas bag, the hands that were, if you bothered to notice, the hands of someone who had spent decades holding knives. He made a decision. The wrong one. He raised his voice slightly, just enough, and two people behind frosted glass panels looked up. Sir, I've given you more time than this conversation warrants. Your grandson is a fine young man, I'm sure. But encouragement isn't the same as qualification. Some families push their kids toward things that aren't realistic for them. That's not a judgment. It's just, he paused. Let the next word land deliberately. A fact of the industry. Clifton looked at him. Steady, unhurried. Are you finished? Sterling blinked. I'd like 10 minutes, at a table, to show you something. Mr. Webb. 10 minutes. A pause. You have a demonstration kitchen. That's for 10 minutes, Mr. Sterling. Clifton's voice dropped to something quieter. Not softer. Quieter. The way a stove turns down before something reduces. And then I'll leave and you'll never see me again. Or you can keep talking. Marcus Sterling had not become successful by being entirely stupid. He looked at this man, 67, gray at the temples, wire on his glasses, paint stain on the bag, and made the calculation that 10 minutes of humoring him was easier than the alternative. He gestured toward the back. Fine. The Sterling & Associates demonstration kitchen was used for client events and influencer content. It was immaculate. Induction range. Japanese knives on a magnetic strip. Mise-en place stations that were, Clifton noticed immediately, set up for show rather than for actual cooking. The handles on two of the knives were loose. The range had a heat differential on the left burner that whoever cleaned this room had learned to work around instead of fix. He noticed these things the way some people notice when a sentence is grammatically wrong. Automatically. Without thinking about it, 3 members of Sterling's staff had followed them in. Curious, the way people are when something unusual is happening, and they can't quite explain why. A young woman in a white chef's coat stood near the refrigerator, arms crossed. She'd been introduced as Petra, Sterling's head demonstration chef. Clifton set his bag on the counter. He reached inside and removed 3 things: a small notebook, a worn cotton apron that had been washed so many times it had faded from black to something closer to charcoal, and a chef's knife. Not a beautiful knife. A 10-inch carbon steel blade, the handle worn smooth, the steel dark with decades of seasoning. Sterling raised an eyebrow. You brought your own knife. I always bring my own knife. Clifton tied the apron. He opened the refrigerator, scanned it for 7 seconds. You have a lemon, shallots, butter, heavy cream, a piece of salmon, and some leftover roasted garlic from whatever you made in here yesterday. He glanced at Petra. The garlic was good. A little more time on the Maillard side would have deepened it, but it was good. Petra uncrossed her arms. I'm going to make a beurre blanc with roasted garlic and a seared salmon. 5 minutes. He looked at Sterling. If you want to time it, time it. Marcus Sterling said nothing. He crossed his arms. He looked at his staff the way a man looks when he's about to be proven right and knows it. Clifton began to cook. What happened in the next 4 minutes and 42 seconds was the kind of thing that's hard to explain to someone who wasn't in the room. It wasn't flashy. He didn't narrate. He didn't perform. He moved the way people move when they have done something so many thousands of times that the body doesn't need to consult the brain anymore. The knife through the shallots was clean and fast. The pieces uniform in a way that looked casual until you realized it wasn't casual at all. It was precision that had absorbed itself so completely it no longer looked like effort. The butter went into the pan at exactly the right moment. Clifton didn't check the heat with his hand or a thermometer. He listened to it. The sound changed for a half-second, and his hand moved. He reduced the white wine and shallots without a timer. He mounted the butter in pre-additions, tilting the pan at an angle Petra had seen in exactly one other place. A masterclass video she'd saved to a private folder on her laptop. One she returned to when she thought no one was paying attention. The salmon went skins side down with a sound like a clean argument. Sterling's chef coordinator, a man named Paul who had said nothing since they'd entered the kitchen, took 2 quiet steps forward without appearing to notice he'd done it. The sauce came together. Clifton tasted it twice. Once from a spoon, once by touching the spoon to his wrist, an old habit. Then added something from a small jar he'd pulled from his bag. A pinch of something. "What is that?" Petra asked. "House blend, smoked paprika, dried orange peel, black pepper, a little ground sumac. I've been making it since 1991. He played it in 12 seconds. Set it on the pass. The kitchen was quiet. Sterling looked at the plate. He hadn't moved. His arms were still crossed, but his jaw had shifted slightly. A small involuntary adjustment, the way a face changes when the brain receives information the body already processed. Petra stepped forward. She picked up a clean fork. She tasted the sauce. She set the fork down. She looked at Marcus Sterling, then she looked at Clifton. "Where did you train?" "My mother's kitchen first. Then the line at Delmonico's in Chicago. Then 3 years in Lyon, under Pierre Marchand." A pause. "Opened my own restaurant in 1992. 14 tables on 43rd. Burned down in 1999. Taught at Chicago Culinary Institute for 11 years after that. Retired 4 years ago." Silence. Sterling's coordinator, Paul, had his phone out. He was typing something. Then he went still. He turned the screen toward Sterling. The Chicago Tribune Archive. A 1994 review. A photograph of a younger Clifton in a white chef's coat standing in a small dining room with 14 tables. The most instinctive American palate working today. Beside it, a 1996 clip. And a 1998 one. And a 2001 James Beard semi-finalist listing. And then a video. A recording of a Culinary Institute lecture, 2009, in which an instructor demonstrated classical French sauce technique to a room of students. The instructor's name on the program listed at the bottom of the screen. Clifton Webb, senior faculty. Paul held the phone toward Sterling without saying a word. Marcus Sterling looked at the screen. Then at Clifton. Then at the plate. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then Petra spoke. Quietly, almost to herself, but the kitchen was small enough that everyone heard it. "He taught that sauce technique. The one in the Marjan documentary. The wrist angle on the butter mount." She paused. "I've been trying to replicate that for 2 years. Clifton looked at her. "Drop your elbow half an inch and trust the pan. You're compensating for a heat differential on your range. It's not your technique, it's your equipment." Petra stood very still. Then she nodded once, slow, like a woman filing something important away. Sterling lowered his phone. Something had drained from his face. The practiced ease, the calibrated confidence. What was left underneath looked younger and considerably less comfortable. "Mr. Webb," he said, and then stopped. Clifton untied his apron, folded it once. The same fold every time. A habit from decades of end-of-service routines. He placed it in his bag. He wrapped his knife carefully. "My grandson scored in the top 4 on his skills assessment. His palate test was evaluated by your own staff as exceptional. He is 17 years old, and he cooks from instinct, which you cannot teach, and from discipline, which he has built on his own." Clifton looked at Sterling without anger, without performance, just the calm, level look of a man who had been certain for a long time and had simply waited for the room to catch up. He didn't come from a cordon bleu family. He came from a South Side kitchen where the pots were secondhand and the ingredients were whatever was on sale, and he's better than half the applicants who accepted. He picked up his bag. "I didn't come here to cook for you. I came here so you'd understand what you turned away and why. And why. A pause. My grandson will find his path. He always does. But the next kid who walks in here with worn-out shoes and a South Side zip code deserves better than what you said to Deshaun in that room. He walked to the kitchen door. Stopped. Your left burner runs about 15 degrees hotter than the display reads. Somebody's been compensating for it by eye. Tell them they're right, but they should know the reason. Then Clifton Webb walked out of the demonstration kitchen, through the frosted glass office, past the reception desk, and out onto Michigan Avenue. He didn't look back. He didn't tell Deshaun what happened. His daughter Anita called that evening. Someone from the Sterling office had called her, she said, confused and a little breathless. Some kind of video had been taken on someone's phone. What did you do, Dad? I made a beurre blanc. Dad. I made a beurre blanc. Dad. Go to sleep, baby. It's fine. It wasn't fine exactly. Not yet. Marcus Sterling posted a clip of the kitchen demonstration the next morning on his Instagram. He framed it as a story about recognizing hidden talent, about his program expanding its definition of classical training. He didn't mention Deshaun by name. He didn't mention the room full of applicants who'd watched a 17-year-old boy be dismissed in under 2 minutes. He didn't mention what he had said about backgrounds and fit and realism. The clip showed 40 seconds of Clifton cooking, just the hands, the movement, the sound of butter in a pan. A voiceover from Sterling about discovering extraordinary mentors in unexpected places. It got 200,000 views in 12 hours. The comments were not what he expected. Someone had already found the Tribune archive. Someone else had found the Marchand documentary footage. Someone found a culinary forum post from 2011, where a Chicago Culinary Institute graduate wrote that their best class, and 4 years of training, was a sauce technique seminar taught by a man named Clifton Webb, who had made them throw out everything they thought they knew and start over. The hashtag started on a food culture account that night. Number Who is Clift on Web. By morning it had 40,000 posts. And then a former student of Clifton's, a woman who now ran a Michelin-starred kitchen in Washington, D.C., posted her own video. 7 minutes long. No music, no filter. Just her standing in her kitchen, looking at the camera. I trained under Clifton Webb for 1 semester at Chicago Culinary in 2013. I want to be very clear about what that means. He is the reason I know how to cook. Not technique. I had technique. He is the reason I understand food. There is a difference. And the idea that a program like Sterling's would look at his grandson and say, not the right fit while this man exists in the world. She stopped. Pressed her lips together. I want to know Deshaun Webb's name, because if he cooks anything like his grandfather, any serious kitchen in this country should be paying attention. 6 more chefs responded within 24 hours. Then 12. Then a food journalist who had been at the 1994 Tribune dinner in question wrote a piece published online the next morning. The chef Marcus Sterling didn't recognize. And what that says about who the industry thinks belongs. It spread faster than the video. The culinary world is smaller than it looks from outside. And the people who move through it remember. The way the industry remembers who came up with an idea first, who cooked well under pressure, who was generous with their knowledge and who kept it locked behind a gate. They remembered Clifton Webb. Marcus Sterling posted a second statement. A longer one, carefully worded, citing a commitment to expanding the program's applicant diversity and a personal reflection on unconscious bias in culinary gatekeeping. He used the word humbled 3 times. He did not mention Deshaun. Anita called Clifton on a Saturday morning while he was making breakfast. Deshaun's been invited to reapply. Sterling's office called. They said the situation was a misunderstanding and they want to schedule a formal evaluation. Clifton turned the heat down under the eggs. What did Deshaun say? A pause. He said he doesn't want to go somewhere that only saw him after they saw you. Clifton was quiet for a moment. Outside, a cardinal landed on the window ledge, looked at nothing in particular, and flew away. He's right, Clifton said. Dad, this is an opportunity. There are other opportunities. Better ones, maybe, with people who looked at him and saw him the first time. He found out 3 days later that Deshawn had already found one. Petra, Sterling's head demonstration chef, had left the company. She opened a small teaching kitchen in the West Loop and reached out to Deshawn directly through a message that said only, "Your grandfather told me to drop my elbow. I've been cooking better ever since. I have a spot for you if you want it." Deshawn started the following Monday. What happened to Marcus Sterling wasn't dramatic in the end. No single collapse. Just the slow, undeniable math of a reputation built on aesthetics, meeting people who cared about substance. The James Beard Foundation quietly declined to renew his advisory seat. The television pilot was shelved. The Instagram following stayed large. It always does. But the culinary community, the actual one, began to step back in a way that was quiet and definitive and impossible to reverse. He is still posting. He still uses the word elevated to describe his approach. But the comments are different now. The serious ones have moved on. Clifton didn't read any of it. The Saturday after everything happened, he was back in his kitchen at 7 in the morning. Apron on. Coffee going. Deshawn showed up unannounced at 8. Gym bag over one shoulder, asking if he could practice his knife work before his first class at Petra's place. Clifton handed him a cutting board. They cooked together for 2 hours. Clifton corrected his grip twice. Deshawn asked why the knife went still for half a second before the pull stroke. Clifton showed him. Then Deshawn showed Clifton a technique he'd learned from a Korean cooking video that did something interesting with a press cut on ginger. And Clifton leaned in and watched. Then nodded once in that specific way that Deshawn had learned to understand as high praise. Outside, November light came through the kitchen window at a low angle and caught the steam from the pot on the back burner. The neighborhood was quiet, and in that kitchen on the south side of Chicago, with second-hand pots, and the good knife and a cutting board worn smooth in the center from 40 years of use, a grandfather and his grandson were cooking. The way they always had, the way it had always been enough. Because it was, and because it would carry forward, and because the thing Clifton had spent a lifetime building wasn't in a restaurant that burned down, or a review in a magazine archive, or a clip with 200,000 views. It was right here, passed hand to hand, the way it has always been passed. The way all the real things are. Something about this one stays with me. I think about what it takes to carry something for 30 years without anyone seeing it, to fold it up and put it away because life asked you to. Because grief asked you to. Because survival asked you to. And then one afternoon it's just there again. The same as it ever was. Because a kid you love needed it to be. That's not a comeback. That's not a redemption arc. That's something quieter and more permanent than either of those words. Clifton Webb walked into that office because his grandson walked out of a room feeling like less than what he was. That's it. That's the whole reason. And in doing so, he reminded an entire industry, and the rest of us watching, that expertise doesn't expire. That what you've built in yourself doesn't disappear just because nobody's looking at it. The world will always have people like Marcus Sterling, people who've learned to recognize value only when it's packaged in a way they already know how to read. The question isn't whether those people exist. The question is whether you let them be the last word. Clifton didn't. Tell me about someone in your life like that, someone carrying something the world couldn't see. Someone who surprised a room, or a system, or just one person who needed to be surprised. Drop their name in the comments, first name is enough, and tell me one sentence about what they carried. I'll read every one. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs it today. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because this channel exists for exactly these people. The ones nobody looks at twice. Until one day, everybody does.